This week's episode of Doctor Who was our second Doctor Light story in a row. But what did I make of Dot and Bubble? In a nutshell, I thought it was okay actually. There was quite a lot of sort of negativity, I think, surrounding it beforehand in terms of the speculation about the story and what fans were saying on social media and stuff, and some of the reviews weren't the most positive either. And it's a story I'm not going to be rushing to rewatch anytime soon. There were certainly things in there that weren't my cup of tea or that I was a bit unsure about. But yeah, there were some quite good moments as well, particularly that ending. So I think this episode certainly had a very interesting vibe to it. It was very distinctive, very specific sort of vibe, and it certainly felt very different to other things we've had, in recent years. Like I say, it was another Doctor Light episode coming off the back of 73 Yards last week, but a very different type of Doctor Light episode once again, and one that was also companion light, and it sort of felt in that regard quite reminiscent of early stuff from the new series like Love Monsters or Blink, where you follow a character who isn't the Doctor or companion, and the Doctor and companion kind of crop up occasionally across the story, maybe at the beginning and the end or whatever, or in this case kind of throughout on the screens. But yes, to all intents and purposes, our main character in this was Lindy Pepperbean, who was certainly a very interesting character in lots of different ways. And that just gave it a very different feel right from the off, because you're following her literally from the moment she wakes up and following her throughout the day as she goes about her life. You're introduced to the whole thing with the bubble, and that gives it a different feel too, because we're literally seeing like her point of view of all these different screens and things, a bit like a Zoom call or TikTok or something like that. They're very kind of clear inspirations for what's going on here, and I think Russell's kind of looked at stuff like that and sort of thought, let's turn that into a Doctor Who story. And that was a weird one to begin with, because it almost didn't feel like an episode of Doctor Who. It felt like Barbie or something, or some other show, following these young influencer type people in their colony world where everything is fine all the time, apparently. It did seem to me like some of those early scenes in particular were going on for quite a long time, that they felt quite long, and I suppose on the one hand, that's just part and parcel of this premise of following one character all the way through with nothing else to cut away to. I think for the most part, the actual world of Fine Time was convincing, and it was nice to be sort of immersed in this world that was very different to ours, well, on the one hand, I suppose. And yeah, I'm kind of in two minds about sort of all that sort of stuff and the technology as well, because, clearly it was a massive feat for the production team to actually, manage to execute this concept of visual Twitter or whatever it was. The whole thing with the bubbles and the screens, and logistically that must have been a nightmare for everybody involved, from Russell writing it with all the different characters to kind of keep track of, down to the people in VFX and the edit afterwards, literally stitching all that stuff together. I mean, hats off to them. So I'm sort of glad they did it, and I think certainly in years to come, people will kind of look back on this, for better or for worse, and say, well, that was, a thing that happened, that was a moment, that was, a sort of a landmark moment for Doctor Who in terms of technology and stuff. And yeah, I certainly think that, I couldn't see any of the joins or the cracks. I think it was convincing the way the effects were done, although I'm not sure how captivating a viewing experience it made for overall, with all these constant, cuts to point of view shots of Lindy's bubble and of the screens and stuff. It kind of felt a little bit limiting and restricting, I think, in that regard, and I kind of wanted a few more kind of normal scenes, just with normal camera angles and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I suppose that gimmick is what kind of made the episode feel so distinctive, so it's kind of a funny two-edged sword of that. I think things were a bit slow to begin with, but they certainly picked up when the slugs came into it, and it was great to see them at last. Again, I think they were kind of convincing for the most part. They'd certainly been enhanced quite a bit afterwards, with visual effects and everything, and CG, because of course there was one practical prop that they used on set, which was glimpsed at filming. I guess as well, with them looking at the episode more generally, they were just kind of there as a monster. There wasn't anything else to them. I'm not sure if they had a particular name or anything, or, it kind of felt like they kind of petered out a little bit. But certainly in terms of the design and everything, they were really, really great. I love traditional Doctor Who monsters like that kind of play on things that do exist in the real world and things that people are grossed out by, like slugs. I can certainly see some people maybe taking issue with the way the Doctor and Ruby were used throughout this, because, for the most part, they were just on the screens until that final scene, which I was kind of expecting going into it, based on things I'd heard, based on reviews. I think also based on how much or how little they'd featured in the trailers as well. That's kind of quite clear to me, going into it. But I can kind of understand people, saying, oh, why have two Doctor Light episodes in a row? Or, why have Ncuti be so absent from his first season? And there's a logistical behind-the-scenes reason to it, because Ncuti was still filming Sex Education at this point. This was part of the first block of filming alongside 73 Yards, so they were both filmed together. Could they maybe have been spread out across the series a bit more in terms of the episode order, having a Doctor-Light episode, then a more Doctor-heavy episode, and then another Doctor-Light episode, rather than having 2 back-to-back? Yeah, maybe, but I guess with like a shorter episode count overall, which is 8 episodes here, it's 7 stories, it's like, there's only so much you can do there. Let's talk a bit more about Lindy, the main character in this, the person kind of fulfilling the Doctor and companion roles, really, or kind of like she's the Doctor and Ricky September was the companion, or vice versa. Obviously, as the episode kind of progressed, you kind of got more of an idea of what was going on with her and the fact that she wasn't necessarily as nice as maybe, she first appeared, or as kind and as pleasant as she makes herself out to be on all these kind of social media video clips and all that kind of stuff. And there was certainly some very striking moments. Obviously we'll come to the end in just a moment, but even before that, there were certainly things threaded throughout the episode, little bits and pieces, where you think, yeah, she is not a very nice person actually, or she's a bit up herself, she's a bit full of herself, a bit entitled, a bit kind of selfish, and I found that really interesting as well, the way that we had this protagonist who was actually not a very nice person, who was actually almost kind of the villain of the piece, really, in a manner of speaking. I thought, again, that felt quite unusual, quite unlike anything else in recent years. I can't really remember the last time we had such an unpleasant protagonist, like front and centre in a story. I think that moment towards the end where she betrays Ricky September, where she kind of reveals her true colours, was particularly sort of effective and particularly striking. It was like, yes, I definitely don't like this person anymore. And that kind of links into a broader thing going on here with all the social media commentary, all the commentary on like the younger generations and the way they behave. And yeah, there were various things like that, some of which, as a kind of youngish person myself, I sort of felt, yeah, okay, that's fair enough. Some of it felt a little bit more kind of like, oh, I'm not so sure about this. I can kind of tell this has been written by like a 60-year-old man or whatever. You could certainly see that in some of the dialogue, I think, for instance, where it's like an older person's kind of view of what a young person speaks like, rather than it necessarily being how a younger person would speak. Though in the same breath, there were actually some bits and pieces that I did feel were quite accurate, like the type of stuff you might see on TikTok, for instance. And so it's kind of one of those things where, again, it was a bit of a double-edged sword. It felt a bit strange, I suppose, a bit close to the bone, perhaps, but also just a bit tonally off, too. So let's talk about that final scene, which, there were some rumours about beforehand. I had seen those rumours. I wasn't so sure, how true they were, and if it was true, how it was going to be executed. But actually, I was kind of pleasantly surprised, I think. I think it was really, really well done. It was a phenomenal performance from Ncuti. You could kind of tell which way it was going, by the time Lindy is about to escape and she's betrayed Ricky, and you can kind of tell she's about to have some kind of confrontation or something, with the Doctor, and I'm not sure how this is going to go. I'm not sure how the Doctor's going to respond to this. There was a wonderful sort of sense of foreboding and doom just in that whole sort of final scene and right before it. I think in the moment I thought the Doctor might reject Lindy straight away on the basis of what happened with Ricky, which I suppose, he doesn't know about, and she lies about that as well. It's another bad thing that she does. But obviously the worst thing of all comes in that final scene with the racism. That's the real thing that properly makes you detest this character and be like, yeah, she has no redeeming qualities. And all of these people here, it played into the idea of privilege that had been established elsewhere in the episode really, really nicely, I thought, and kind of made you recontextualise the rest of the episode, which, like I say, was kind of a bit take it or leave it, maybe a bit fluffy, but that final scene just really kind of turns it into something else. And I think that was really, really nicely done. Obviously not nice to watch. It was a horrible scene to watch, a kind of chilling scene, and a goosebumps moment there, with Ncuti and with the Doctor slowly realising what's going on and watching his reactions, restrained to begin with, and then he just lets loose and screams, and it's the side of the Doctor we haven't seen before. I thought sort of addressing the race thing and the fact the Doctor isn't white anymore in a futuristic story was actually really inspired as well, because that's the type of thing you might expect to come up in a historical episode. But no, it comes up in a futuristic episode instead, and I think that idea that people, could be just as bad, if not worse, in the future, under the wrong circumstances or the wrong people, or if they're brought up in the wrong way or sheltered like these people are, that idea sort of felt shockingly possible. So I think on the whole, in summary, it's an episode that I didn't mind. I thought it was okay, not as bad as some people were making out it was going to be. There were certainly some nice ideas in there, and it had a very distinctive sort of look and feel about it. And it's definitely not an episode that's ever going to be like one of my favourites ever, or one that I'm going to be really wanting to rewatch all the time. But that final scene is one that is definitely going to stay with me for some time. What did you think of Dot and Bubble? Be sure to let me know in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this video, please do leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new for more Season 1 content over the coming weeks. But otherwise, until the next one, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye for now.